Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over a poll from the state of New York which finds that New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would trounce Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer, one of the most high-ranking Democratic senators in the U.S. Senate, in a Democratic Party or primary, as the party leader is, quote, bleeding support from Democrats and Jewish voters in a potential 2028 Senate race in New York. That is very important to note also that Schumer is not up in 2026, the Senate race is in 2028, but still nonetheless, this is pretty interesting. Squad member AOC would trounce Chuck Schumer in the primary, and according to a recent poll conducted by the Honan Strategy Group for Jewish Voters Action Network, AOC leads five-term incumbent Schumer by 54% to 33% among likely Democratic voters in the Big Apple in New York City. That's roughly about a 21-point lead or so over Schumer. AOC, who is now 35 years old and serves as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, leads Schumer among Jewish Democrats as well, 45% to 33%, with 17% saying they are undecided. This is a massive wake-up call for Chuck Schumer, said Maury Litwack, the co-founder of Jewish Voters Action Network. He's not only bleeding support in the Democratic Party overall, but also in the Jewish community. The numbers are troublesome for Schumer, who is Jewish and has relied on Jewish voters as a key area of support in his 50-year political career. The 74-year-old Senate Minority Leader isn't up for re-election until 2028, but Litwack said the poll results are likely more of a reflection of dissatisfaction with Schumer than support for AOC, who is also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, according to the article, a group that supports the controversial boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. Again, that's according to the poll in the article in that. AOC has called Israel's retaliatory bombing of Gaza a genocide after the events of October 7, 2023. Litwack, however, was critical of Schumer's actions in the wake of those attacks and subsequent anti-Semitic protests in the United States. The leading Jewish elected official in the nation did not step up in a moment of rising anti-Semitism, and the poll reflects that, Litwack said. He said Schumer failed to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act last year, while Democrats controlled the Senate and White House, and he served as Senate Minority Leader. The legislation would empower the U.S. Education Department to use the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance IHRA definition of anti-Semitism when investigating potential violations of civil rights law. Litwack also noted that Schumer was accused of advising Columbia University to ignore the accusations of anti-Semitism, which was referenced in a bombshell House investigation report on campus protests. Schumer vehemently denied the claim. Meanwhile, Schumer attacked Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the Senate floor months into the war in Gaza, saying new elections should be held. The senator wrote a book about anti-Semitism, but his actions did not match his words in combating it, Litwack said. Schumer also came under fire from a firestorm of criticism from Liberal Party activists already smarting over Donald Trump's second election to the White House by voting in March to pass a 6-month government funding bill. Some called on him to step down as a Senate Democratic leader, preferring someone else to be more confrontational with Trump. The New York senior senator defended the vote, claiming a partial shutdown would have wrought devastation like we've never seen. The poll was conducted over phone text with 1,136 Democrats, conducted between May 15th and 18th, with a margin of error of 2.89%. Okay, so obviously there's a lot going on in this poll, but for the purposes of today's video, the main takeaway here is that in this poll, which again is among a voting group that should be very supportive of Chuck Schumer, and in the past has been very supportive of him, AOC would lead over Schumer 54% to 33%. It is worth noting for the 2028 elections, Wikipedia does not yet have an individual page for this New York Senate race yet. They often don't do that until after the current midterm elections. So we have a little bit of time to go on that. But five-term Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, who was reelected by 56.8% of the vote in 2022, not really a massive vote percentage compared to what you would expect out of the state of New York, but he has filed the paperwork to run for re-election again, and U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been seen as a possible candidate for the Democratic primary. AOC has seen private support from colleagues to challenge Schumer following support of a Republican budget bill. Another Democratic poll, a Data for Progress poll, found AOC leading over Schumer 55% to 36% in a hypothetical primary. So that poll combined with this poll that we're talking about today both shows AOC leading over Chuck Schumer by about 20 points in both of those polls. What's very interesting here as a perspective for AOC versus Chuck Schumer is a few things. For one, there's AOC herself, which, as of right now, if I had to guess, it seems like AOC is more leaning towards running for president in 2028. It's possible she ends up not running for president in 2028 and decides to run for Senate instead. But so far in the early polling that's been done for the 2028 Democratic primary, AOC is polled when Kamala Harris is in the race at third place in the race to White House average. She has about 11.5%, one of three Democrats to reach over 10% of the vote with Harris in the race. And then the one poll that was conducted without Harris in the race showed Buttigieg in first place with 17%, AOC in second place with 14%, with still 17% either being other or undecided at this time. So there's a lot of open undecided vote for the Democrats for 2028, and AOC thus far doing a lot of speeches with Bernie Sanders, and they're fighting the oligarchy tour. AOC is putting her name out there as a national well-known figure now in American politics. So it's possible AOC decides to run for president in 2028, which would make this conversation essentially mute. But maybe AOC decides 2028 is not the right time for her, or maybe she doesn't see a pathway to winning and ultimately decides that she could run for Senate against Chuck Schumer in 2028. If that were to happen, the early polling suggests that AOC would actually start out as the favorite in the Democratic primary. I think one Senate race for 2026 that this seems similar to is the Senate race in Texas, where incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn is facing a primary challenge from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. And in this one, it's a little bit of a different situation in the fact that this is mainly a matchup of Cornyn and Paxton are running against each other. Paxton saying Cornyn's not loyal enough to President Trump. Cornyn is saying that's obviously not true. He's one of Trump's top supporters, and Paxton has his own problems with his prior impeachment. Whereas the New York race would be a situation of Chuck Schumer and AOC going at it, with Schumer saying the Democratic Party needs new leadership and new blood to lead them, and Chuck Schumer has let the Democratic Party down. So it wouldn't really be the apples-to-apples comparison, but you see a case of a longtime incumbent senator going up against a primary challenger. And in this situation so far, Ken Paxton has led in every single primary poll that's been taken so far. And when you look at the margins, some of the polls are relatively similar margins to that 20-point victory or so that AOC versus Schumer ended up being. This poll from back in July of 2022 showed about a 20-point lead. We did have another poll, I believe that was about a 17-point lead from the middle of April, a 16-point lead towards the beginning of May, and another similar poll of roughly 14 to 15 points from Qantas in the middle of May as well. So I think 2028 in New York, if AOC decides to run against Chuck Schumer, could be a very real possibility that Schumer, the longtime Democratic incumbent senator, could actually lose that primary to AOC. The question will be, does AOC actually want to run for Senate, or does she look instead to make a 2028 presidential run? If I had to guess right now, and it would 100% be a guess, I don't have any prior information or anything to base this on, but it seems like AOC is getting her name out there to run for president in 2028 instead of running for Senate in 2028 as well. I think it's more likely she runs for president, but we're going to have to wait and see how that all goes. As for the general election itself, we saw in 2024 Kamala Harris win the state of New York by about 12.6%. The Senate race we saw in 2024, Kirsten Gillibrand win by 18.3%. In 2022, we saw Chuck Schumer win by 14% over his Republican opponent. I think whether it's Chuck Schumer or AOC, we could probably expect the 2028 New York New York Senate race to probably be either a safe or likely Democratic win at best for the Republicans. I think around a double-digit win in New York at 10% is probably the bare minimum for what the Democrats are going to do in 2028. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe a divisive primary makes things a little bit more competitive, but I think the Democrats should have no problem holding on to that Senate race either way. But I thought this was interesting. Leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts about this news. Do you think AOC versus Chuck Schumer in 2028 will happen? And if it does, who do you think would win in that matchup? Leave your thoughts down below. Also, make sure to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video.